Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. 10 men found themselves stranded on a remote island after their ship capsized in a violent storm. As they took stock of their surroundings under the blazing sun, the gravity of their predicament began to sink in. No shelter, limited food and water, and no clear path to rescue. Jack, the de facto leader, rallied the dispirited group. We need to search the island for anything useful. Spread out and reconvene here in an hour. The men fanned out, combing the beach and venturing cautiously into the dense jungle. It was Tom who made the discovery, calling out, "Hey guys, over here! I found something!" The others rushed over to find Tom standing next to a large, weathered trunk, half buried in the sand. With a heave, they lifted the lid. Incredulous stares greeted the contents. Piles of women's clothing in various styles and sizes. Sundresses, blouses, skirts, even lingerie, and several pairs of heels. "What the?" muttered Dave, rifling through the garments. "Is this someone's idea of a joke?" At the bottom of the trunk, pinned beneath a bra, was a neatly folded note. Mark snatched it up and read aloud, "Welcome, gentlemen. By now you've discovered your new wardrobe. Your survival depends on following these instructions closely. Dress and conduct yourselves as women for the duration of your stay. How convincingly you embrace your new roles will determine how well you fare on this island. Good luck, ladies." Stunned silence descended, broken only by the crash of waves on the shore. The men exchanged uneasy glances, trying to process the absurdity of their situation. "This is insane!" sputtered Chris, his face reddening. "I'm not wearing a dress!" Others chimed in with similar protestations, their voices rising in anger and disbelief. Jack held up a hand, quieting the group.
"Listen, I don't like this any more than you do. But right now, we don't have a choice. If there's even a chance this helps us survive until rescue comes, we have to take it."
Grumbling and cursing, the men began gingerly picking through the clothes. They held up garments against their bodies, trying to find something that might fit. Steve, a burly construction worker, looked comical holding a flowery sundress to his barrel chest. "I'm gonna look like a flippin' clown in this getup." Laughter rippled through the group, breaking some of the tension. Gradually, with much griping and awkward shimmying, the men shed their salt-stained, tattered clothes and donned their new outfits. The transformation was striking. 10 scruffy, bedraggled men had become 10 rather unconvincing women. Hairy legs poking out from skirts, muscular arms straining at flimsy sleeves, clumsy feet stuffed into heels. They stood uncertainly, tugging at their clothes, unsure how to carry themselves in these alien garments.
"Well, don't we make a lovely bunch?"
quipped Jack, smoothing his floral skirt. He took a few mincing steps in the sand, nearly turning his ankle in the heels. The others guffawed at his antics. As the initial shock and hilarity wore off, a creeping unease set in. Why the bizarre demand to dress as women? And who was behind it? The island suddenly felt less deserted, the watching jungle more menacing. It was Mark who spotted it first, the glint of a lens half concealed in the foliage. He pointed it out to the others with a sinking feeling.
"We're being watched,"
he said grimly.
"There are cameras hidden all over the place."
The men fell silent, the weight of their predicament pressing down on them. Stranded on an island, under surveillance, forced to play act as women for some unknown purpose, it was like a surreal, waking nightmare. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vivid streaks of orange and pink, the group set about making camp for the night. They gathered driftwood for a fire, scavenged for coconuts and edible plants, all the while struggling with their restrictive clothing and wobbly heels. Paul, an accountant, tottered up with an armful of kindling, his face shiny with sweat. "How do women do anything in these things?" he griped, kicking off the heels.
"Maybe that's the point,"
mused Dan, an engineer.
"Slowing us down, making us vulnerable."
He frowned, mind racing with the implications. As darkness fell and the fire crackled, the men huddled around its warmth, picking at their meager dinner. The mood was somber, each lost in his own thoughts of home, family, and the surreal ordeal they now faced. Tom, the youngest of the group, broke the heavy silence. "You know, my sister's a teacher," he said thoughtfully. "She's always saying how women have to be creative, resourceful, think outside the box." He looked around at his companions, firelight flickering on their faces.
Maybe that's what we need to do. Use our skills, but adapted for these new circumstances.
Slowly, heads began to nod as Tom's words sank in. They were still the same capable, intelligent men, even if they looked different on the outside. Mark, a doctor, spoke up. "I can try to fashion some first aid supplies out of the clothes and plants, makeshift bandages, poultices, that sort of thing." Others chimed in with ideas of their own. Steve could use his strength to build sturdier shelters. Jack, a former Boy Scout, could teach them all survival skills like fire building and knot tying. Paul, with his head for numbers, could help ration their supplies. As they shared ideas and divided up tasks, a fragile sense of cautious determination took hold. They were in an impossible, bizarre situation, but they would adapt. They would innovate. They would find a way to survive even in heels and skirts. The men bedded down for the night, still self-conscious in their frilly nightgowns, giggling nervously at the absurdity of it all. But beneath the humor was a grim resolve. Come morning, they would begin their new lives on the island, as women in appearance, but still very much themselves at the core. As he drifted off to sleep, Jack's last thought was a wry one. If they did make it back to civilization, no one would ever believe this story. Hell, he hardly believed it himself. But then again, life had a funny way of throwing curveballs. You just had to learn to catch them, even in a bra and heels. As the sun crested the horizon, painting the skies in hues of orange and pink, the castaways stirred from their uneasy slumber. They emerged from their makeshift shelters, still self-consciously tugging at their unfamiliar attire. Jack, ever the leader, called the group together.
"All right, ladies,"
he said with a wry grin.
"Time to figure out our next move."
They gathered around the smoldering remains of the fire, some perching awkwardly on driftwood logs, others sinking into the sand, their skirts billowing around them. It was Steve who spotted it first, a weathered, leather-bound book nestled among the coals. He gingerly fished it out, brushing off the ash.
"What's that?"
asked Tom, peering over Steve's shoulder. Steve flipped open the book, his eyes widening as he scanned the pages. It's a rule book. For us." A hush fell over the group as Steve began to read aloud.
Day 1, foraging. Venture into the jungle and gather provisions, all while maintaining your feminine personas. Remember, ladies, grace, poise, and a gentle touch.
Jaws dropped and eyebrows shot up as the men processed this new development. Not only were they stranded and cross-dressed, but now they had specific tasks to complete.
"This is ridiculous,"
muttered Dave, picking at the lace trim of his blouse. "We're not actually going to go along with this, right?" Jack held up a hand, silencing the murmurs of dissent.
"We don't have much choice,"
he said grimly.
"If we want to survive, we need food and supplies. And if playing dress-up is the price we have to pay, so be it."
Reluctantly, the men divided into teams and set off into the jungle, tottering on their heels and trying not to trip over their skirts. The dense foliage seemed to close in around them, the heat oppressive and the mosquitoes relentless. "Ouch!" yelped Paul, slapping at his neck. "These bugs are eating me alive!"
"Probably attracted to your perfume,"
quipped Tom, earning a glare from Paul. As they pushed deeper into the jungle, Mark noticed a strange pattern in the undergrowth, a series of seemingly deliberate clearings, each containing a small, carved wooden box.
"Hey, check this out,"
he called to the others. They gathered around as Mark pried open the first box, revealing a small scrap of paper inside.
"The path to truth is paved with lies,"
he read aloud, frowning. "What's that supposed to mean?" They opened the other boxes, each containing a similarly cryptic message. Pieced together, they hinted at something larger at play. An experiment, a test of some kind.
"I don't like this," said Chris, shaking his head. "It feels like we're being manipulated, like lab rats in a maze."
"But why?" wondered Dan. "What's the point of all this?" As they trudged back to camp, their foraging bags laden with coconuts, berries, and strange, spiky fruits, the questions weighed heavily on their minds. Some argued for trying to escape, to defy their unseen captors and strike out on their own. Others, like Jack, maintained that their best chance was to play along, at least for now. Tempers flared as the debate intensified, the stress of their situation boiling over. It was Mark who finally intervened, his calm, doctorly demeanor cutting through the tension.
"Fighting among ourselves won't solve anything," he said firmly. "We need to stick together, support each other. That's the only way we'll get through this."
Grudgingly, the men agreed, settling into an uneasy truce. As they picked at their forage dinner, conversation turned to their lives back home. Families, jobs, hopes, and fears. Steve spoke of his daughter's upcoming birthday, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's turning 5, he said softly. "I promised her I'd be there no matter what." Paul shared his dream of starting his own business, a plan he'd been too scared to pursue. "Maybe this is the kick in the pants I needed," he mused, gesturing at his floral dress. As the night wore on and the fire burned low, the men found solace in their shared stories, their laughter mingling with the crackle of the flames and the distant crash of waves. Morning brought a surprise, a group of strangers emerging from the jungle, their skin adorned with intricate tattoos and their bodies draped in similar feminine garb. The castaways scrambled to their feet, instinctively moving closer together. The newcomers approached with hands raised in a gesture of peace.
"Welcome, sisters,"
said the leader, a tall, muscular man with flowers woven into his beard.
"We've been expecting you."
The men exchanged bewildered glances. Sisters? Expecting them? What was going on? The leader, introducing himself as Makoa, explained that the island was home to an ancient tradition, a rite of passage for men to walk in the shoes of women to gain understanding and empathy.
"You are the latest participants,"
Makoa said, smiling warmly. "Your arrival has been foretold." The men were stunned. All this, the shipwreck, the clothing, the challenges, was part of some elaborate cultural ritual? Some, like Dave and Chris, were indignant, feeling duped and manipulated. Others, like Tom and Dan, were intrigued, seeing it as a unique opportunity for personal growth. Jack, ever the pragmatist, saw the benefit in playing along. "If this is the path to getting off this island," he said, "then I say we embrace it." Makoa invited them to participate in the tribe's upcoming festival, a celebration of femininity and the goddess who watched over the island.
"You've taken the first steps," he said, "but to truly understand, you must immerse yourself completely."
The men hesitated, torn between their discomfort and their desire to learn and possibly escape.
"What do we have to lose?" shrugged Mark.
"We're already in dresses, might as well go all in." And so, with varying degrees of enthusiasm, the castaways agreed to join the festival. The next few days were a flurry of preparation, weaving flower crowns, practicing dances, learning the sacred songs of the goddess. Some struggled more than others. Dave, in particular, resisted the lessons, grumbling about the indignity of it all. But even he couldn't help but crack a smile as he watched Steve, the burly construction worker, delicately threading blossoms into his beard. As the sun set on the eve of the festival, the men gathered on the beach, resplendent in their floral finery. They had come a long way from the awkward, self-conscious bunch they'd been just days before. Tom twirled experimentally, his grass skirt swishing around his legs. "You know," he said, "I never appreciated how freeing a skirt could be." The others chuckled, nodding in agreement. There was a newfound lightness to their movements, a gracefulness that had been absent before. The festival itself was a blur of music, dance, and laughter. The castaways threw themselves into the celebration, spinning and leaping around the bonfire, their voices rising in harmony with the tribe. For the first time since their ordeal began, they felt truly uninhibited, their worries and fears melting away in the joyous abandon of the moment. As the last notes of the final song faded into the night, Makoa approached the breathless, exhilarated men.
You have honored our traditions, he said solemnly, and in doing so, you have earned our respect and our trust. He pressed a small, carved token into Jack's hand. Keep this close, he said. It marks you as one of us.
The men looked at each other, a newfound sense of camaraderie and accomplishment shining in their eyes. They had come to this island as strangers, but now they were bonded by something deeper. But their joy was short-lived. In the early hours of the morning, a monstrous storm rolled in, lashing the island with howling winds and driving rain. The men scrambled to secure their camp, their feminine attire hindering their movements. Skirts tangled around legs, hair whipped into faces, and delicate shoes slipped in the mud. "I can't do this!" wailed Chris, struggling to keep his balance in the heels. "How are we supposed to survive like this?" "We adapt!" shouted Jack over the roar of the wind. "We use what we've learned!" And adapt they did. Using their newfound grace and dexterity, they navigated the treacherous terrain, gathering their supplies and shepherding each other to safety. They huddled together in a cave, shivering and soaked to the bone, their once pristine dresses torn and muddied. But they were alive, and they were together. As the storm raged on, the men took stock of their situation. They were tired, hungry, and scared, but they were also resilient. Mark tended to the scrapes and bruises, his gentle bedside manner soothing frayed nerves. Steve led them in deep breathing exercises, his calm presence a balm in the chaos. And when the rain finally abated and the sun peeked through the clouds, it was Tom who rallied them with a rousing speech about perseverance and the power of teamwork. As the castaways emerged from the cave, blinking in the bright sunlight, they were greeted by an unexpected sight. Makoa and his tribesmen stood before them, solemn expressions on their faces.
"The storm was a test,"
Makoa said, his voice deep and resonant.
"And you have passed, but your journey is not yet complete."
He gestured behind him, where a sprawling obstacle course had been constructed, winding through the jungle and along the beach. It was a daunting sight, towering walls to climb, deep pits to cross, and intricate puzzles to solve.
"This is your final challenge," Makoa explained. "A test of both your physical prowess and your understanding of the feminine spirit. You must work together, using all that you have learned to conquer each obstacle."
The men exchanged apprehensive glances, their still damp dresses clinging to their skin. They had come so far, but could they handle this? Jack stepped forward, his chin held high. "We accept the challenge," he said firmly. "We've come too far to back down now." Makoa nodded, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. "Then, prepare yourselves," he said. "For at dawn tomorrow, your trial begins." The men spent the rest of the day in a flurry of preparation. They gathered what supplies they could, fashioning makeshift tools and weapons from the scraps of their feminine attire. Mark tore strips from his skirt to create a rudimentary first aid kit. Steve braided vines into sturdy ropes. Tom practiced his knots, his delicate fingers deftly weaving the cords. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in vivid hues of orange and pink, the men gathered around a small fire. The mood was somber, each lost in their own thoughts of the challenge ahead.
"I never thought I'd say this,"
said Dave, breaking the silence.
"But I'm glad we've got each other. I couldn't do this alone."
Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. They had started as strangers, but the trials of the island had forged them into a team.
"Whatever happens tomorrow,"
said Jack, his voice heavy with emotion.
I'm proud of us. We've faced things most men never have to, and we've done it with grace and strength."
As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the men assembled at the start of the obstacle course. They had shed their tattered dresses for more practical attire, shorts woven from leaves, tops crafted from coconut fibers. But each man still bore a token of their feminine journey. A flower tucked behind an ear, a bracelet of shells around a wrist, a splash of berry juice on lips and cheeks. Makoa raised a conch shell to his lips, blowing a deep, resonant note. It was the signal to begin. The men surged forward, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The first obstacle loomed before them, a towering wall of logs slick with mud.
"Remember the festival dance,"
called Dan.
"Use your hips, your core strength."
Gritting their teeth, the men began to climb, their movements fluid and graceful. They hoisted each other up, hands clasping forearms, feet finding purchase on shoulders. At the top, they paused to catch their breath, grinning at each other in exhilaration. One obstacle down, but many more to go. They raced on, leaping across a series of precarious rope bridges, shimmying through a dark, claustrophobic tunnel, and solving a complex puzzle involving weights and pulleys. Each challenge pushed them to their limits, both physically and mentally. But they persevered, drawing on the lessons they'd learned from their time as women. Mark's gentle encouragement kept spirits high. Steve's strength was invaluable in the physical tasks. Tom's clever mind made quick work of the puzzles, and Jack's leadership held them together, keeping them focused on the goal even as fatigue began to set in. As they neared the end of the course, a shout rang out from the sidelines. "Look, up there!" The men turned to see a helicopter hovering overhead, a news logo emblazoned on its side. Cameras pointed down at them, broadcasting their every move.
"What the hell?"
muttered Paul, squinting against the sun. Are we on TV? Makoa approached, his expression grave.
"Your journey has captured the attention of the world," he said. "People everywhere are watching, debating, learning from your experiences."
The men were stunned. All this time, they thought they'd been alone in their struggle. But now to learn that they were unwitting stars of a global spectacle?
"This is wrong,"
said Chris, shaking his head.
"We didn't sign up for this. Our pain, our confusion, it's not entertainment."
But others, like Tom, saw a different angle.
"Maybe this is an opportunity," he said thoughtfully.
"A chance to spark a conversation about gender roles, about empathy and understanding." As they stood there, grappling with this new revelation, Makoa urged them onward. "You are close to the end," he said. "Complete the course, and all will be revealed." With heavy hearts and racing minds, the men pressed on. The final obstacle was a mammoth zipline, stretching from the top of a cliff down to the beach below. One by one, they clipped their harnesses to the line and stepped off the edge, screaming in exhilaration as they hurtled through the air. The feeling of the wind in their hair, the rush of adrenaline in their veins, it was a moment of pure, unadulterated freedom. All the struggles, all the doubts, melted away in that glorious moment of flight. As their feet touched the sand, the men erupted in cheers and laughter, hugging each other in elation. They had done it. They had conquered the course, and in doing so, conquered their own fears and limitations. But their celebration was cut short by the arrival of a sleek black helicopter. It touched down on the beach, sand swirling in the rotor wash. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, a broad smile on his face.
"Congratulations, gentlemen,"
he said, his voice smooth and practiced.
"You've just completed the most groundbreaking social experiment in television history."
The men stared at him, confusion and anger warring on their faces. "Experiment?" spat Dave. "We nearly died out here. This was no game." The man held up his hands in a placating gesture.
"I understand your feelings," he said. "But please, hear me out."
He introduced himself as the producer of a new reality show, one designed to challenge traditional notions of masculinity and femininity.
"We wanted to see what would happen when men were forced into a feminine role,"
he explained.
to see how they would adapt, how they would grow, and you exceeded our wildest expectations."
He went on to describe the global reaction to their journey, how viewers had been captivated by their struggles, moved by their transformation, how a conversation had begun, one about gender norms, about empathy, about what it truly means to be a man or a woman.
"You've started something powerful here,"
the producer said, "something that could change the world." The men were silent, processing this overwhelming information. It was Tom who finally spoke.
"I don't know if what you did was right,"
he said slowly.
"Putting us through hell, broadcasting our pain, but I can't deny that it's changed me, changed all of us."
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.